Hi there. I hope everyone's having a great day. I thought I would bring a little devotional from Psalm 1 today. The Psalms are very special to me. Many of you know that years ago, my wife and I, we lost a baby, and that was a very difficult time for both of us. And for me, I found almost no comfort in anything other than looking at the Psalms. And I kind of pored over the Psalms day after day after day throughout the Psalms, kind of over and over and over. And eventually it was almost like a veil or whatever was kind of lifted from me, and some joy started to return to my life. But so the Psalms are very special to me. I thought I would look at today in Psalm 1. Psalm 1 and Psalm 2 are kind of unique in the fact that neither Psalm seems to have any author that's known for sure, that's directly attributed to them. Most likely they were written by David, but it's not known for sure. Psalm 1 and Psalm 2 again neither have a known author. Psalm 1 deals primarily with the law, whereas Psalm 2 deals primarily with prophecy. Psalm 1 is more emotional, talking about happiness and all, whereas Psalm 2 is more intellectual, asking the question why. That's the first word of Psalm 2. In fact, why do the nations rage? Psalm 1 has to do with blessings. Or it begins with blessing and leads to curse, whereas Psalm 2 begins with a curse and ends with a blessing. Psalm 1 deals with Christ primarily and his mediation for the godly, whereas Psalm 2 deals more with Antichrist and the judgment of Antichrist and his forces at the end, what I think of as the Battle of Armageddon. So it's kind of a little preview of what Psalm 2 would indicate. But let me read to you Psalm 1. It says, "Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. In all that he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish." So we see basically two parts for Psalm 1. The first part has to do with the godly man, whereas the second part has to do with the godless man. The godly man in Psalm 1, at the beginning of Psalm 1 here, we see a couple of things about him. He's going to avoid certain things, and then he's going to do certain things. The first part talks about some of the things that the godly man will avoid. It says he walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. So what I see there is a kind of a progression, if you will. So he doesn't want to even basically listen to or take counsel from any kind of wicked person, or participate with sinners in some way or another, or even sit down with them and abide with them, habitate with them, if you will. In Psalm 1, verse 1, there seems to be some kind of progression where it talks about he won't walk with them, nor stand with them, or even sit with the wicked person. And I find that that's true in my own life, that there seems to be almost like a black hole, if you will, that kind of where you can kind of get pulled into evil or wickedness if you're not careful. and it usually begins by me listening to something or someone, and then I start thinking about it. Oh, that maybe that's not so bad, and then next thing you know, you're a little more involved, and then next thing you know, you're running around with the wicked person, and so again, it seems to be this gravitational pull, if you will, and that's kind of what it's talking about here. So the blessed person won't do any of those things. So it's way easier to stop it at the beginning versus waiting until you already are sitting in the seat of scoffers. So it's easier to stop it at the beginning. So hopefully that's what you'll do. So the godly man is going to avoid certain things or certain people. And then we see that the godly man does do certain things. And we see in verse 2 that his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. So obviously it's talking about God's word and all, and of course most everybody's heard preachers talk about meditating and how that's kind of like the cow that will eat the grass, swallow it, kind of spit it back up, and then chew it and swallow it again, kind of spit it back up and chew it and swallow it and so forth, like that. And so that's kind of the idea of meditating on God's word. So a good way to meditate upon God's word, if you ask me, anyway, would be to read it and maybe even memorize some of certain passages, especially if they mean something special to you that kind of jumped out to you for one reason or another, and maybe memorize those passages. So sometimes I will wake up in the middle of the night and there will be a certain verse on my mind, and I will or a certain event that happens or something like that, and I'll be driving down the road and think, oh, what about this verse, and I can kind of meditate upon things like that at night in the bed, while I'm driving down the road in the car, while I'm out hiking or something like that. There may be a verse, maybe while I'm on the mountainside and I'm overlooking a beautiful mountain scenery or something, and ooh, look at this, and some verse may come to my mind or something like that. So meditate on God's word. If you do those things, and then it says, blessed is that man, or that word blessed is actually plural, and it means happy. So it could really be translated, happy is the man that doesn't do these certain things, but does do these other things instead. So if you want happiness in your life, this is a good way. Avoid certain things, like it talks about here in verse 1, but do the things that it talks about in verse 2. And then verse 3 says, this godly person will be like a tree planted by streams of water, that yields its fruit in its season. So we're going to see that he's fed and he's firmly rooted, and then we see that he is also fruitful and that he will flourish. So 4 F words, if you will, for the godly man that does these things that it talks about here. And then the godless man, starting in verse 4, says, the wicked are not so, but are like chaff that the wind drives away. So we see, again, kind of talking about like wheat or barley, that sort of thing, grain. They would take it on top of a hillside where the wind would be easy for the wind to sweep across that, and then they would toss it up in the air over and over and over like this, and the little outer husk, if you will, the chaff part, the waste part would kind of just blow away and drift off. And so it says that a wicked person is more like that chaff. So it's kind of carried away by unseen forces. And so sometimes we'll see a wicked person that's very flighty, so to speak, kind of driven about, tossed to and fro, as sometimes people say. And they will just seem to be over here one day and over there the next, and then back over here and back over there, and so forth like that. So That's not a good thing, obviously. There's no steadfastness to them, like that tree planted by rivers of living water, or any such thing as that. So they will be kind of driven about. And then it says in verse 5 that they will basically be doomed. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the day of judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of righteousness, for the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked shall perish. So we're going to see that the wicked person, again, is kind of flighty, kind of driven about, and eventually doomed. So a couple of thoughts about the godly man and the godless man from Psalm 1. Anyway, it's a beautiful psalm. I encourage you to read it, to study it, and to meditate upon it, because we're going to see a big difference between this psalm and Psalm 2. Lord willing, we'll look at Psalm 2 next week. If I have time, I will try to do a devotional on Psalm 2 next week. But again, one is talking primarily about Christ, or the godly man, and Psalm 2 is going to be talking more about Antichrist and his group, which I believe is more prophetic in nature. Psalm 2 is. All right. Well, I hope you have a wonderful day.